Uh, Sanjeev, uh, Jaideep, Professor Datta, Professor Agarwal, friends. I haven't actually thought this through. I am in a little bit of a wonder as to where to start. Let me start by my wife's comment when she heard that I'm coming out for about an hour to this. He said, "What are you doing? This Shubha girl has written something decent. Sanjeev keeps writing, and you write only note sheets. Now, why? What is your claim to fame? I mean, in going there, I said that these are things we can argue after my real retirement. Now, a couple of stories come to my mind when I think of people like Jaideep, the promise that this kid is showing. One of the stories that comes to my mind is about Queen Victoria. What has Queen Victoria got to do with Jaideep and what has got to do with Pasa? Let's get on. Queen Victoria was fascinated by a children's novel. Can you guess the name? Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland, and she got hold of Lewis Carroll and said that, Mr. Carroll, you have to present me the next book. You have to actually dedicate your next book to me. Lewis Carroll was totally embarrassed. He said, "Madam, not the next one. Your Highness, not the next one. Maybe the next after next." He said, "No, I insist." And when a lady like that insists, it becomes a command, a royal command. So the next book that landed up with Queen Victoria was a rather complicated treatise on algebraic geometry. And it's a heavy tome that was full of calculations. And the book had Dr. Charles Dodgson, Dean of the Faculty of Mathematics, University of Cambridge. Cut it off and wrote Lewis Carroll. Now that was the actual Lewis Carroll. Lewis Carroll was not a jokester, not a prankster. He was actually a professor of mathematics who played around and actually is taken to be the father of psephology, predictions in electoral behavior. He could also swing back to write a ballad about puppets. Yes, a ballad about marionettes. That's Lewis Carroll. The point I'm getting at is that some humans are not constricted by the boundaries of the mind, not boxed and pigeonholed the way we are conditioned, we are programmed. And it's our duty to see that their walls are not erected artificially. I look upon this, and then there are certain other things that come to my mind. Actually, since I was rambling one, I was scribbling a piece when the last speaker was speaking. Why do we need science fiction? Do we have at all any time to go into this world of fantasy and enjoy? I put it like this, that some humans are capable of elongating the linearity with which stops at the boundaries of reason. Some people are capable of extending it beyond that stage. And most humans are, as I said, genetically programmed to stop at a particular limit. The limits might be there within a grey shaded area. It doesn't necessarily be a boundary line. It could be a broad barrier. Now, if you look back upon two of the persons I had read, I've actually stopped reading sensible literature. All I now read is political literature. I have to survive in this present job, and actually, H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells, one of the fantastic works that I remember was The War of the Worlds. Have you read it? Try reading it. It's still not outdated. The Martians come in, it's 1890s when he writes, and the invasion of the extraterrestrials comes in through H.G. Wells, the first one. And he brings in as a writer, Surrey, where I happen to be a land that was familiar because I used to, when I was to bunk University of Sussex and come over, I had to go over those places. Now, here H.G. Wells talks about the Martians coming in, and then there's a big war. It's a riot of imagination of a type that you can't believe. and he was scoffed. He was actually scoffed, said that, look, a chap with such literary strength, having meandered into this absolute unbelievable quagmire, he's got nuts. Now we are sending missions to find those nuts. Just about just about 115, 120 years after his first work. So there are no boundaries. And hang on. When the Soviet Empire collapsed, people were wondering where lay the roots of its collapse, other than the one that was obvious, that is a picturization, a framing of reality in a manner in which it was not, and therefore the inward implosion, collapse, and things like that happened. One of the reasons I had ascribed in 89, 90s when we were discussing was an allusion that I had taken from H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells's Martians dominate the world, and there was absolutely no hope for the human race to survive. And he gets knocked on the head and falls into a pit or something like that. It's long. By the time he wakes up, he finds the Martians all dead. What had happened was the superior Martians had actually not got used to something called the humble bacteria. It was a little bacteria that finished them all. That was H.G. Wells and the power of the bacteria. This far before you had these viral diseases coming up. More important, it was a little chip, the electronic chip, the TV chip, the one that sold images, the dream merchants of the West, who actually destroyed the edifice of the structure of post-Tsarist Soviet Russia. Little chip, that's all. It could be compared to the bacteria that got into the heart and entrails of such a huge impregnable empire and made it collapse. Come over to Jules Verne and we'll go on. But then I'm reminded of the hippie generation, the hippie period in which we were all brought up, and I would not hesitate to tell you that one had partaken of some of the indulgences that came with that age, much to the annoyance of our parents who thought that we'd never make anything in this world. Now, Jayadi's parents at least have some surety that this guy will make something with his life. So it was during this period that there was a debate whether the Americans the post-baby boomers had completely spoiled themselves in the world. I have a completely different view of it. I had a different view even then, I possess a different view even now. If you look at the clash of the two empires, the organized and the disorganized, the methodical mind of these Japanese and the Germans, you will find a cold ruthlessness of efficiency, which you find in one of our large neighbors. Pitted against that was an open society that believed in letting the human mind fly, that actually institutionalized anarchy to some extent, like all democracies are supposed to do. Now, immediately after the war, I mean the Second World War, it was assumed that Japan and Germany are over. It's over. It's up to the Allies. What happened was just the reverse. For the next 20, 30 years, Japan and Germany bombarded the West with products of their superior technology, the hardware. Every TV, every fridge, every white good was Hitachi, Sanyo, Samsung, whatever. The methodical mind hadn't stopped. On the other hand, there was this development that was taking place in IT, that is the software world. I mean, there are some of you who know far better than me. But somewhere down the line, by the middle of the 90s or early 90s, we had this impression that maybe we would actually get some sort of a convergence, because if after all everything is reducible to binaries and digits, somewhere down the line they are got to meet. But no logical mind would ever make them come together. It was the junkies and the hippies of the 70s who blossomed into the geniuses of the 80s. Steve Jobs, others, who could actually blow up their minds. I use the term blow out, to blow up their minds, to break off all the barriers between the different realities that exist, both in terms of physics, in terms of particles, and imagine the reality that reality itself couldn't imagine for itself. It was this convergence that would shape the future of the world, the presence of the world. This would be required, this required a certain freeing of the mind, which conventions don't permit. It is open only in an open junkie society, if I may use the word, that let the Americans do it, let the Germans do it, let the Japanese do it, let everybody do it, let the British do it. But when it came to actually getting the whole act together in an act of convergence, what we call ICT today, it was the American junkies who did it. And keep doing it. Luckenberg, keep doing it today. That requires an ambience in our society to allow them to grow. Mercifully, one of the things that keeps me ticking is when I see amongst this anarchy all around in India, amongst this admitted inefficiencies, there is space for such boys to think, to dream, and to rattle the rest of the world. It is they who will convert these ideas, they who will take us to outrageous limits, they who will be the subject of ridicule. At times, be prepared for it, as Mrs. Harma was telling you. That's exact pronunciation, Harma. So, Shoma was telling me, incidentally, that reminds me, okay, let me complete this. So it is actually they who will be leading, not maybe from the front, because the front is reserved now for a certain class about which all of us are bothered about. I would not extend this description further. I am sure the level of intelligence in this room is far higher than, let us say, those who are recording this piece. So we are, while we leave the physical, the visible vanguard to those who have made a mess of things and would continue perhaps to be making much of it, the real leadership of society would lie in those who think and move forward. Just before closing, I would try to appropriate a term that Sanjeev has used. Sanjeev said, Shubha is my probationer. Sanjeev was never my probationer by dictum. He was posted in a district called Purulia, which is in somewhere end of the world near Dantewada somewhere. I haven't actually been there once. And I was posted in Bardhaman, which was a rather attractive place at that time. But Sanjeev chose to come over to our district, and my lady probationer, where is she?
In
Karnataka. She was a young girl with a lot of hope and a lot of energy, and this thing, not ever been able to understand my reservation with actually I'm very shy with ladies, so I'm making a confession. So she would never understand why I was so shy and diffident. So Sanjeev would come over, and therefore I can now claim that part of the craziness that you see in Sanjeev was passed off at the appropriate age and encouraged. And if Sanjeev has passed it on to Shubha, it's twice over. So with these words, let me take this opportunity to congratulate Jaideep. Never be constrained by logic. Work on logic for your earnings. You have to fill your stomach. But never be constrained by what the others look upon as constrictions of immediate reason. Because superiorism that lies beyond it. At a time when Einstein could conceive of the relationship between matter, energy, and light, he had actually broken the barriers. Today, when we stand, I really don't know. At the speed at which we are growing, at the exponential speed, at the dizzy rate at which we are coming through with newer and newer concepts, it's going to be a fascinating part, a fascinating phase in human history to be in, provided our graces permit us to retain, to understand, to assimilate, and to absorb. With these words, I thank all of you.